Well, that last sketch that I did on the small panel, the last video, what was it called? Details are never good for a study, or something to that effect. I still was wanting to use a knife on that, but I had so many details in there that I thought, that could actually show hope doing this and doing that with a brush. So that may end up as a brush painting, but I still want to do a knife painting. So a knife painting is what it's going to be. No charcoal, no sketch, no outlines, just an idea. So let's start with that idea. First off, I would like to lay in some dark color here. A little bit of alizarin crimson, a little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of yellow ochre, and a few strokes. Now a couple of strokes with just alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue and a hint of white. And I'm not using, well, maybe I'll use this brush yet for a little bit, or this knife yet for a little bit. Now just some ultramarine blue. So you'll see I'm getting a few strokes off of every time I load the knife, but each time those strokes are a little bit different from the last set of strokes. Now just some alizarin crimson and yellow ochre. Because I do not want to look through bush into, through the bush into a scene, or at a scene in the distance, I really want our view to stop looking at the face of this bush peering, giving the indication slightly of peering into the bush a little bit. That's why I'm starting with the dark. Also, in this case, the most distant area. This painting will be more of a decorative piece, again, than what you might call a scene. I've always been told, well, not always, but often my wife has told me, stop making a scene. And I think that's what she means. I could be wrong. Okay, we're continuing with our ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson combination. Whoops, a little bump in there, let's get rid of that. I sort of have a composition in mind, sort of, and that's really about as close as I can describe it. Oops, getting all these little bumps in here. Don't want that. Okay. I'm still sticking with the same colors, more or less. I'm leaving room for a tree trunk here. Now, alizarin crimson. No, now now ultramarine blue and a little bit of yellow ochre, just to introduce some greens. Now a little ultramarine blue and some burnt sienna to come up with a little more neutral feeling to the green, I guess you could call it. So it's not as green a green as it could be. It's more dirty. It's maybe more of an army green. This is the only tree that it's the main trunk in the scene. So this trunk is the only one that I'm trying to avoid mostly painting over right now. I'm going to lay other trunks in here, but I don't mind if they're a little more obscured and if the lines aren't as hard differentiating the trunks from the background. So I feel quite comfortable just to lay, go wet and wet, as it were, putting those trunks in. Let's add a little yellow ochre to that. Okay, that's pretty much the feel I'm after, color-wise. Now yellow ochre and a bit of ultramarine blue and a bit of burnt sienna and a little bit of white. Painting things this way is actually very forgiving compared to my usual technique. Because going wet and wet, well, you can just keep changing things as you go. And using a knife is very good that way too, because you can lay the paint on heavily and scrape it off. And even though where you've scraped it off, the panel has already got sort of the oily texture to it, with a knife it's still possible just to reapply over top of it and hide it completely or mostly without danger of mixing into the paint that's already on your palette. You don't need to use such a light touch. Give this a white now. Back to our ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. This is going to be considerably more impressionistic than most of my paintings. At least I'm saying that now. You know how that can go. Let's cut it off about there. Excuse me. I think our light's going to be coming from behind us, but mostly from the right. And I would like this trunk to catch some light and the foreground. But then also the foliage that's growing out of the top of this trunk may as well have a bit of light to it. So we're going to make that mostly green, fairly warmish green though, yellow ochre, and yellow ochre and ultramarine blue, and burnt sienna and white. Okay. Let me add more burnt sienna to that. And let me put it a stroke here or there. Introduce it to the foreground a bit. Okay. Burnt sienna and yellow ochre. Even more, a little bit stronger. See, the light's coming in, it's spilling across, spilling across the dried grass in the foreground, catching the edge of the trunk near the bottom mostly. Now, this dried grass in the foreground, of course, also needs to have some shadow here and there, where the sun does not touch it. In the very immediate foreground, we'll go dark again to focus our intentions, our attention up here. So I may as well actually because the panel is receded from the edge of the easel, I'm doing upward strokes so that I make sure I get decent coverage on the bottom. And I'm using ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. Oh, and a touch of white, just a bit of white. And I have a more limp knife, which I probably should be using. But maybe I'll reserve that for after I have the bulk of the panel covered. Let's take a step back and have a peek at that. Yeah, that's okay, I guess.
But I went through.
I guess. Yeah. As far as starts go, that could be worse. I think I'd like to continue these colors up to here, but I'll tone them down a little bit now. Oh, that's too high a value. Knock that down a little bit. Trying to remember not to overmix this stuff on the palette. Knocking it down in some places, bringing it up in others. That's too much of a bandeau green. Let's say we cut into that. Let's say we cut into that. And scraping the excess off my palette. Yeah, you waste paint by doing this, but are you really wasting paint? You know, if you just keep mucking around with your dirty pile on the palette and you lay it in and it's too dirty and then you have to scrape it off and then you have to reapply. Frankly, that's more efficient than this is. No matter what, if you're afraid to waste paint, then don't paint. Because you're going to waste paint. It's part of the learning process. And I don't mean from beginner to professional. I mean everybody during the process is gonna make mistakes. And say to themselves, oh, I should have known better. Yeah, well, you know, we're human. Okay. There's something I see that I don't like already. I do want that trunk to be cut off in a reasonable way. Okay. How about a bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of yellow ochre, and a little bit of raw umber. Is that going to be too bright? I think that's going to work. I think that'll be okay. Maybe that's a little bit on the blue side. So we'll take a little more raw umber. Try to go a little browner. Okay, now some white and just raw umber. Okay, time to lose this knife. Well, not permanently, but for the moment. Okay, we'll switch to this one. It's a little thinner, a little more flexible. And it's more controllable. You gotta have some of that. Okay, so the highest values on that trunk obviously are not right on this edge. Even though the sun's coming from the left, I don't want it right against the edge. I want to bring it in slightly. So let's take titanium white and a bit of yellow ochre. Okay. I think that tells us all we need to know for that particular spot. Okay, now let's break in to this line. Let's break it up a little bit. Back to our ultramarine blue, or sienna. Another reason I like this knife, it's capable of giving us a much lighter touch because of the flexibility of the blade. Now, I think we need to increase the strength here. Okay, I think that's about it for the moment on filling in the painting. How about if we put some indications of trunks in the background now? Try to bring some interest back into the thing. Placement is important. I'm using a knife, so I'm using globs of paint, and I am not paying attention to my hands, so every time I give my knife a wipe, I'm not using a big enough piece of toilet paper, so I'm getting paint all over my hands here. Let me just give that a little scrub. Both hands. I'm generally good at keeping clean and not spilling, but not at the moment. Okay, a little more raw umber, and maybe I'll put a hint of cobalt blue in with it. Alright, that's kind of cheesy looking, but I think we can work on that. Alright, now I'm gonna squeeze a little bit of cad yellow pale onto my palette. And add a little bit of cad yellow deep. It's funny, some companies would call this cad yellow deep, some companies would call this cad orange light or cad orange pale. Doesn't matter what they call it. What you're after is the right color for the job. I guarantee you could take 5 different paint companies, all with claims to a certain color. You put them next to each other on your palette, and you will have 5 different colors. But I always enjoy this part because we add a little bit of, well, we just add a little life to things, you know? Gives it some interest. Okay, enough of that for now. That was a mixture of the cad yellow pale and the cad yellow deep. Now let's take cobalt blue. No. let's take phthalo blue and add a hint of white to it. See how strong that is now? You know, if I had started with the phthalo blue, you'd have played all your cards. There'd be nowhere left to go with strength. So it's not about the color itself, it's about the relationship of that color to the colors around it. Let me add a little more white to that. That's enough. Scrape off the extra. And I think I'll take a little bit of, because it's a decorative piece, I'm not afraid to put some crazy-ish colors in here. So we're going to take a hint of quinacridone magenta. Throw a few hints of it in there. Oh, don't like that one. See, now I've got a line. Wasn't paying attention. I want them to be somewhat random in appearance. Keeping the knife clean again. See, laid that intense pink right above this one in line. Again, pays to go slowly. The painting may look, you know, when it's done, what I'm after is sort of a painting that looks like it was done in 5 minutes, but done well, which of course I cannot do in 5 minutes. All right, we will throw a little bit of cad yellow pale right on top of that remainder of quinacridone magenta, and move that a little bit to the left so we're getting sort of a warm orange going on here. Oops, I accidentally grabbed the wrong knife again. Well, it's working. Maybe I just won't worry about it. I'm finding this to be a bit weak around this trunk, so what I'm going to do is go back to my ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and let's just give it a little more strength, shall I? I gotta tell you, I had a much steadier hand when I was 30 than I do now. Just sharpening up a few lines here and there. Shooting for the drama here. Okay. Let's break that up a little bit. Okay, a couple of small touches now. Cleaning the palette. When I'm working on something this small and I have to change colors so often, I am cleaning my palette a lot. And I don't just scrape it, I give it a wipe. Because I like to keep my colors clean. Okay, I shouldn't be so concerned about joining everything. Doesn't even look good when I do that. A lot of little branches for a painting that is supposedly kind of rough, but as long as you look at it and intuitively you think, yep, that's going to work, then what's the harm, right? I'm going to bring some of these colors over to the right a little bit. We may be back to having a line, but at least it's not a straight line. Okay, stepping back time. Let's do that for a moment. Yeah, I think that's not too bad.
For process.
Okay. Maybe this, I have a bit of a hole here. It's okay to have a few. That one is a little too strong though, given it's right against the edge of the painting, to my way of seeing it. So we'll just put something in there. Good enough. Okay. Now, a couple of light strokes. The foliage is coming out from under the tree, and the the sun is hitting it a little bit. It might be pretty intense, but I think maybe I won't worry about it. Okay. Stop. Stop, 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 stop. You know, I try to bring it to the point where it doesn't need any major changes. If it comes upstairs and lives with me for a while, and something keeps bothering me, the same thing keeps bothering me, then I will just, I can take a brush and I can touch it here and there without things being too noticeable. I think we're not bad all in all. What I'd like to do is reintroduce some strength here. Broader strokes, broader strokes. Okay. Now, how about I think we'll bring the light down here a little more as well. That'll do it. Not too intense, but it's enough. Now, how about a hint of just straight alizarin crimson, just pink. It's awfully close to the quinacridone look, but I can't say I mind it. I do not mind it. I also don't mind this. It's a line of these pinks that are just coming. They're sort of, what would you call it, lunging out of the underbrush a little bit. There's a bit of a design to it, a bit of movement, so that you end up with sort of a happy medium between randomness but controlled. I mean, that is the idea behind design often, right? So, okay. I'm really not sure this needs a whole lot more. You know, it's funny when I bring things upstairs to live with them and I see them on separate days, and you know, or a few hours break, and I go back and see them. I see them a little bit differently each time. That's why if it's the same thing that bothers me every time on a painting, then I'll want to change it. But often it's just different things that I see that bother me, or actually, conversely, things that I like. You know, I'm not sure I want to do any more to that. This is a little bit solid on the edge here. And it's sort of maybe a bit of a weak look to it. Maybe what I can do is get rid of some of it. Just lower it. I mean, it is on the edge. I don't want it to occupy. I don't want it to suddenly jut up. Jut up. Oh, jut up. What are you talking about? Sorry. Yeah, you know, I think I might just put a little signature on that. I like it. I kind of like it, you know. It's color. It's got some, what am I doing here? More paint. It's got some color, but at the same time, it's not, you know, it's not a flower garden. It's not overly cheerful. It has a bit of mystery. And it's loose. Okay, guys. I'll square it off. I'll square the camera off with the painting again. I often forget to do that, but I realize that if I don't, you don't see what I see. And I want you to see what I see. Or, you know, from my perspective, visually anyway. Yeah, I'm glad. I like that. Just dark, toned down. Still some interest. It's not just all one color. It's not just a block. It's got variety in it. Okay, now that I'm done patting myself on the back, I will wish you a good day. Talk to you soon.